Sisler is ready to go.
I have to see this for myself. Morning, y'all! What's going on? Woo! Hello, Tennessee. All right, I'm gonna step away. Should I turn this off? We good? Woo! Good morning. Man, it's such an honor and a pleasure to be here, and just standing in the back of the room as we're walking through the Pledge of Allegiance and of course the prayer, just knowing the work that you all do, it really touches my heart. I've had the opportunity to talk at a couple different safety conferences around the country, Arkansas most recently, and I live in Birmingham, and then just getting this opportunity to be with this group of individuals really means a lot to me. And I've got to spend some time learning more about the work that you do through Pine Bluff and some different companies that are knee deep in it. And it truly is an honor. So I just want to let you know that I'm here, I'm with you, and I want to meet you where you are at today. So that is my hope and my goal as we spend this next 45 to 50 minutes together while I'm up here on stage, is that I meet you where you're at in your story right now. Because here's the thing, the work that you do, the pressure that builds, this idea of being present is not optional, it is essential. And that's what I want to talk about today. I don't want to talk about this idea of perfection and doing life and giving you this hoorah speech about how to be perfect in life and to do your jobs really well. I want to talk about the importance of presence, the presence in your professional lives as well as your personal lives, and the importance of that on the job and when you walk through that door at home at night to greet your family. Because as a sports reporter, I've witnessed some of the most prolific moments in sports, okay? The confetti raining down on the field when a national championship is won, those game-winning drives, those buzzer-beater moments. But what I've learned in all of it, it's not what happens when the lights are on and there's 80,000 screaming fans in the stadium. And I guess you Tennessee fans, we probably have to crank that up to what? What are y'all at now? Is it 110? Y'all at like 110 in your stadium? It's crazy. It's wild. But being a part of that, I realized isn't so much about when the lights are on. Some of the most profound stories and the stories that stay with me happen behind the scenes, in the locker room, in the quiet, in the calm, in the tears, and in the resilience it takes to get back up and to keep going when nobody is watching. And that is life, y'all, because every single person in this room has a story with success, but also a story of setbacks, a story of struggle, but a story that didn't break you but ultimately built you. And today I want to talk about this idea of becoming shatterproof. Because becoming shatterproof is not about this idea that we never break, because let's be real, y'all. Adversity is here. Adversity will streamline your entire life. But it's not this idea about never breaking. It's what you do and how you learn to pick up the pieces, not if, but when you do. And still being able to create that life of joy and of resilience. And it's about becoming shatterproof, because it's always a work in progress. And so I want to lean in today a little bit to my story, but really, as I said, I want to meet you where you're at. Because once again, you all, each and every single one of you has a story. But the one thing that we all have in common in this room in our stories, we've all experienced shame. Shame is the very thing that tells us to be quiet, don't use your voice, go sit in the corner, live in the darkness. We don't want to talk about those parts of our lives. We don't want to reveal those to the people around us. Because shame is the thing that keeps its grip on us. But what I've learned through this process, through this journey, is that when you look at shame, acknowledge shame, bring it to the forefront, bring it into the light, you too can loosen shame's grip on your life and find freedom. And so I hope today through this journey that you can also find a level of freedom in your story and maybe look at your story a little bit differently. So let me introduce you first to the Sisler family. My mom, my dad, my older brother Alan. We grew up in Roanoke, Virginia, a sports family, always on the go. My brother was a three-sport athlete, football, baseball, basketball. We always had college football on Saturdays. On Sundays, it was the NFL. And oh, by the way, we love some NASCAR, my friends. Where are my race fans out there? Woo, let's go. My husband and I were just out at Talladega this past weekend. We took our son there for the very first time. And ooh, boy. It is quite a sight to behold. The race is about as good as the people watching. Okay? There are some good people watching at Talladega, my friends. But I grew up going to the racetrack with my brother. He was on a pit crew there for this local little speedway. It was a quarter-mile track. And I remember sitting on those asphalt cinder block, stands. We'd sit there and I'd have my funnel cake and my Little Caesars breadsticks, indulging while I watched my brother out there competing with his race team. So it was always a lot of fun. But we were a sports family. My brother played 3 sports. And as he was out there doing his sports, my dad was always the volunteer coach. And then little old me was the rambunctious, energetic, crazy one. And my parents honestly got sick and tired of taking me to the ER time and time and time again, y'all, because I was all energy all the time. I got the battle wounds to show for it, okay? And so finally they said, all right, we got to do something with this girl. So they enrolled me in the sport of gymnastics at the early age of 3, and little did they know that the sport of gymnastics was going to take off very quickly. You might have to advance that slide. Doing something back there. There it goes. We got it. So the sport of gymnastics was something I fell in love with at a very early age. And so at the age of 5, I was competing in the state of Virginia, traveling all over the state, working my way up the ranks, till finally I got to level 10 at the age of 10. So things took off pretty quickly. And when I finally reached level 10, that also meant my first opportunity to compete on the national stage. And this first national competition was in Orlando, Florida. And so I'm so fired up for this opportunity because we're about to load up the car and we're headed to Orlando. It was about a 12-hour drive. It was the old navy blue Buick Regal. My dad in the front seat with his old Atlas. Y'all remember those days, right? The old Atlas, getting the highlighter out, I mean, nowadays I got this lady telling me exactly turn by turn where to go and I still get lost. I don't understand it. Life has changed so much since then, but we're loaded down in the car. We've got all the snacks you can think of, because the best part of this is that my mom worked for Nabisco. So all you could eat Oreos, my friends. Oh, it was the best. So we're cruising down the road, about a 12-hour drive, and we get to this resort just outside of Orlando. And I remember walking into the ballroom that day. It was a ballroom similar to this that was converted into a gym. And I remember it was practice day, and I walk into the gym, and I'm super fired up, super excited for this day and this opportunity. And my eyes are real big as I see all this elite talent. And I'm thinking, all right, it is my time to shine. And with all that my family and my mom and dad and I had put into this sport of gymnastics, my goal was to go to this national competition and medal in the all-around. So in the sport of gymnastics, just to give you a little debrief for those who don't know, there's 4 events for the girls, for the women: vault, bars, beam, and floor. And so you basically take the cumulative score, and that becomes the all-around. So for me that day, I wanted to medal in the all-around. It didn't have to be first place, second place, third place, like we're going on up to 10th place, whatever. But I want to medal around my neck for the all-around, just to prove and to show my parents that all the hard work dedication that we had put into this and the financial piece of it, come on y'all know about the sports life, was worth it. So it's competition day, y'all, and I am confident. I get out there, my first event is the floor exercise, boom. Stick my routine, get over to the bars, boom. Nail the landing, get over to the vault, and not my best event, but somehow pulled it out. And then comes the balance beam. And the balance beam, my friends, woo, let me tell you, I don't know who invented that apparatus, 4 foot high, 4 inches wide, but it's one of those deals that'll make or break you. But I knew I could stick this routine. I could already feel the metal being placed around my neck. So as I mount the balance beam, y'all, I'm going through each skill as if walking on water. I get to the final skill before the dismount. It's called a full turn. Easiest skill in the code of points. All I got to do is get this full turn, baby, and I'm onto the dismount, and it is game on. And as I step up to do that full turn, y'all, my foot grabs the side of the balance beam, and boom, all of a sudden I'm down on the mat, just like that. And I remember thinking to myself, oh my gosh, like I literally just fell on a stinking full turn. I just wanted to like disappear, pretend it never happened, because we spent a lot of money to be here, spent a lot of time, like this was the epic competition, and I blew it. But as I'm about to put my hands back up on that balance beam, all of a sudden, y'all, it's like you can hear a pin drop in the arena, the silence. And at the back of the arena, my mom, she jumps out of her seat and she says, "Don't worry, Lauren, we're still going to Disney World." And y'all, that, my friends, was the reassurance that I needed that life happens. You are going to fall down time and time and time again. No matter how much you train for one moment, you practice for one moment, you prepare for one moment, you are going to fall down. But the lesson learned here, and this is something I couldn't quite put words to back then, but have had to learn this process over and over and over again as I've gotten knocked down and had to pick myself back up, is this: falling is not failing unless you refuse to get back up and to keep going. That's it. Falling is not failing unless you refuse to get back up, because we all have a choice. How are we going to respond to adversity when you fall down? Because that's how life works. You get knocked down, your confidence gets shaken, you think you're not good enough, imposter syndrome sets in, I don't belong here. So now what? It's the grace that you show yourself when you do fall down, when you do make a poor choice. Because we've all done it and we all will continue to. How do you pick yourself back up when everybody else around you is watching? And so that the lesson has been learned for me in many ways as I transition from this career in gymnastics, trying to figure out what my next step was. Okay? Obviously, it wasn't the end of the world. We went and did our vacation at Disney World, and it was awesome. But I'm trying to figure out kind of what do I do with this gymnastics career, because let's just call a spade, okay? I am 5'9". Way too tall to be a gymnast, my friends. Put into perspective, Simone Biles, greatest of all time, she's 4'8", okay? Wee little petite thing. So I kind of missed my mark. And at the time I was about 5'2", 5'3", and I kept hitting my growth spurt, boom, here we go. I was literally cruising above the treetops, okay? So I knew the Olympics weren't happening for this monstrosity over here. However, maybe a college scholarship was within reach. And so that's what I leaned into, and that's what I went after. So I started sending my recruiting tape out all over the country. I'm sitting around the dining room table with my mom, addressing upwards of 50 of these things, putting them in a manila envelope. And yes, I said VHS tapes, okay? Tapes. Y'all know the VCR times, right? Sometimes I'm like, what in the world? We're 30 seconds and it is out to the world to see. The huddle videos, the Vimeos, Snapchat, Instagram, all the things. Oh no, we're rolling with the fossilistic times here, okay? And so we're sending out these tapes all over the country, and I'm looking at different schools. UNC, NC State, were two of the schools I really wanted to go to, West Virginia, and then Air Force Academy. Air Force Academy was pretty high on the list, okay? I really wanted to go to Air Force Academy for two reasons. Number one, my dad was in the military. I was born in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, in Gitmo, and I knew the military was kind of already in the blood. And then the second piece of that was the financial piece. My parents couldn't afford to put me in school, much less med school. So I was like, all right, you know, this is the ticket. The problem is, y'all, my test taking scores were not very good. This thing called the SATs, I literally took it 3 times, and every single time, y'all, my score got worse, and it got worse, and it got worse. So Jen, here comes the rejection letter from Air Force Academy. Nope, sorry, not good enough. So now I'm having to figure out, where am I going to go to school? Maybe I go to community college for a little while, but I can't put my gymnastics career on hold. What do I do? Thankfully, by the grace of God, I got a letter from a school called Rutgers. And y'all, this Rutgers girl, y'all, I didn't have any idea where Rutgers was. But y'all, I went for an official visit. Am I going to let you just roll this thing right there? I went for an official visit, and honestly, it was a little bit of a culture shock. Okay, I told y'all I'm from Virginia. I do consider myself from the South, the southwestern part of Virginia. I get to Rutgers in New Jersey, and I'm like, oh. And as soon as I open my mouth, they're like, oh, you're not from around here, are you? And I'm like, what gave that away, y'all? But it was a place I knew I could spread my wings and fly. And so I signed my letter of intent, y'all, and I'm off to Rutgers, where the world awaits. And I'm so fired up for this opportunity, and I'm over here doing the gymnastics thing. Oh, by the way, living it up, going to all the football games. And I just want to point out to you all, because I know we got a lot of football fans here in the room. You're going to hear from one of those coaches tomorrow, which I know is going to be awesome. So that picture on the right there, war paint and all, y'all, we were 1-11 my freshman year in football. 1-11. And I hate to say it, here in the SEC, here in the South, y'all are ticked off when you're 11-1. Am I right? Okay, yeah. But I showed up and showed out for my team, my Scarlet Knights. I was living the dream. Life was going as scripted. Fast forward to my second semester. I'm studying for exams, it's midterms, hanging out. You know, every once in a while, my roommate and I, Kara, we'd break out the old school Nintendo. Y'all know about the old school Nintendo, right? And my favorite game was, we love playing Tecmo Bowl, we love playing Tetris. And I still have an old school Nintendo at home, and my husband, who is 7.5 years older than me, is convinced that we need to throw it out, and I'm like, never. Like, I will be blowing on cartridges for the rest of my life. It's nostalgia, right? So we're studying for exams, and I remember picking up the phone, because not a day went by that I didn't call my parents. Always picked up the phone, always called my parents, always talked to my parents. Every single day, I was in communication with my parents while I was at Rutgers. I talked to my mom for a few minutes. She then handed off the phone to my dad, who was dozing off on the couch per usual. And I remember we talked a little bit about just life and gymnastics, and he had just celebrated his 52nd birthday. And I remember being disappointed because it was the first time in my entire life that my dad, that I wasn't home to celebrate with my dad. And so, I said, Dad, I'm just so bummed I'm not home to celebrate. And he said, Lauren, you're going to be home this summer. We're going to have all the time in the world to celebrate. And it's going to be great. And so the last thing he said to me was, Lauren, we love you. We're so proud of you. Just keep working hard. I said, I love you. We said our goodbyes, and I hung up the phone. Set my alarm clock and drifted off to sleep. Suddenly, I wake up to my phone ringing, and I sit up abruptly. It's still dark outside. It's just after 3 a.m. I grab the receiver that's sitting on my desk. I look at the caller ID, and it says home. My heart starts racing. Why are Mom and Dad calling me right now? I grabbed that receiver as fast as I could. I said, hello? And my dad on the other end said, Lauren, I need to talk to your brother. And he sounded a little panicked, and I said, well, Dad, what's wrong? And he said, Lauren, I just need to talk to your brother. My brother at the time was in Norfolk, Virginia. He was a parachute rigger in the Navy. He was stationed there. He had just gotten off watch that night, so I figured, something's going on with Alan. I found my brother's phone number, recited it back to my dad, and my dad said, I'll call you right back. I hung up the phone. No more than 30 seconds passed. That phone rings again. I grabbed the receiver as quick as I could. I said, hello? My dad, after a long pause, finally said, Lauren, your mom died. I said, what? What do you mean, Mom died? Like, we just talked on the phone. She's 45 years old. It's the middle of the night. Like, Dad, what happened? He said, Lauren, I can't explain it now, but I need you to get on the next plane you can, and I'll be at the airport to pick you up. And so there I am, 18 years old, trying to figure out now how I was going to get home. Y'all, I didn't even have $50 in my bank account. So as I get out of my bed, my roommate comes over to console me, and we get on the phone, we call the airlines, we're on hold for over 30 minutes, we finally get through to them. She has an emergency credit card that we were able to use, thankfully, to book my plane ticket. I get a ride to the airport, and y'all, all I wanted to do in those moments and those hours that would follow is I just want to run and jump in my dad's arms. I just want him to tell me everything's going to be okay, because my dad always made everything okay. As my plane touches down at the small regional airport in Roanoke, I grab my bags and I go sprinting through the terminal as fast as I could go. I run outside through those doors, and I'm looking everywhere for my dad. Looking everywhere. And all of a sudden I see my cousin and my uncle pull up. And I'm really confused, but I'm also very relieved. Familiar faces, two people that can help me make sense of this all. We're going to get in the car, we're going to go home, I'm going to see my dad. Everything's going to be okay. And as we start driving, nobody says a word. Not a word is spoken. Until finally, I worked up the courage. And I said, Uncle Mike, I just want to see my dad. Where's my dad? And he pulled the car off to the side of the road, and still to this day, I can feel the gravel crunching underneath the tires. As he turned around and looked at me in the backseat of that car, and he said, Lauren, I'm so sorry, but your dad's passed away too. And in that moment, you can switch to the next slide, I sat in the backseat of that car, my life flashing before me, thinking about these two people, my mom and my dad, my two best friends, the two people that I love more than anything in this world, the two people that I'm not ashamed to say until the day that I left for college, would come into my bedroom, they would tuck me in at night, we would say our prayers, and they would always encourage me through hard work, through faith and determination, Lauren, you're going to go places in life. Gone. And there I suddenly was, this 18-year-old girl, living out my dream, living out my family's dream, hopeless, broken, scared, and shattered into a million pieces. The very next day, I walk into the funeral home, and I'm sitting there with my brother as the funeral director hands us a piece of paper, a receipt, a bill, $7,400. This became my new reality. Just a few short days after burying both of my parents, we're pulling into the driveway of my Auntie Linda's house, my mom's sister. And as she puts the car in park, she turns and looks at me and she says, "All right, Lauren, it's time to go back to Rutgers." I said, "What? Go back to Rutgers? Like, I need time? I need space? Like, I can't go back to Rutgers." And she said, "Lauren, you have a commitment to yourself, your university, your teammates, and this is what your parents would want. You have to go back to school." So I felt like I didn't have a choice. Pack up your bags, Lauren, it's time to go back to Rutgers. And let me tell you, when I got back on campus 10 days after my parents died, y'all, it was an absolute roller coaster ride. Once an A, the honor roll student, C's and D's became the norm. Never seen an F on a paper in my entire life, and y'all, all of a sudden, I am seeing myself fail. Watching myself free fall. My first summer back home, after my parents passed away, I'm standing in the living room of our house as a moving truck comes up that driveway. And within a few short hours, everything in that house was boxed up, taped shut, thrown on the back of a moving truck to be auctioned off to the estate. I'm talking about everything, down to the last picture on the wall. There was nothing left. There was no will. The cars were repossessed. The house went into foreclosure. My brother and I were left with absolutely nothing. I went back to Rutgers for yet another semester, trying desperately to hold on to anything that I could. Anything that I could. But I knew the reality was setting in as I tried to run as far from reality as I could, y'all. You don't keep your grades up, you're going to lose your scholarship. You lose your scholarship, you get kicked out of school. You get kicked out of school, then what? What are you going to do, Lauren? And after months going through this, drudging through this, my gymnastics coach finally sat me down. And I knew as soon as she looked me in the eyes, I was like, ooh boy, here it comes. Here comes that tough love conversation. She said, "Lauren, we love you. We are here for you. We have all these resources at Rutgers, right here. But the bottom line is, Lauren, you have to be willing to stand up and take that first step forward." And that's when my perspective shifted ever so slightly. When I realized that as I'm sitting in my mess, that I have to be the one. I've got all these resources, but I have to be the one to make the choice to say, I'm going to get back up. I am going to get back up. And so, y'all, it was baby steps, one foot in front of the other. Got a tutor, started going to study hall. And oh, by the way, a 2.5 GPA ain't getting me into med school. So we can forget about that. So I switched majors, went the sports broadcasting route, and I started seeing a therapist. Someone that could help me unpack what I was feeling, because not only was I feeling the sadness and grief, y'all, I was feeling angry. And I know you've all been there, asking this very question, why me? And I was in the throes of it, y'all. Waving that pity party flag, why me? And so I was able to unpack some of those things I was feeling, understand some of this grief that I was walking through, and to navigate some of this anger. And finally, as I started to work through things, slowly but surely, it was like the weight that was on my shoulders slowly started to lift. You can switch to the next slide. And I realized, thankfully graduating on time, getting a degree. Going back to Rutgers wasn't so much about just getting that degree, y'all. It was about reclaiming my life's narrative. Recognizing that in life, y'all, someone or something at some point in time will take a baseball bat to your life and shatter it into a million pieces. But as those pieces sit by your feet, through the human spirit and through resilience, we all have what it takes to pick up those pieces and to keep moving forward and to find that joy once again and to find purpose in our lives. Because that's why we're here and that's what we're called to do, to live this life with purpose. And so thankfully I was able to graduate and set those wheels in motion for this whole broadcasting career, okay? And y'all, I told you I wanted to be a sports doctor. At some point in time I thought I'd be wearing that white coat. So this whole sports broadcasting thing has been pretty interesting. I jumped around to different TV stations, working my way. I was in West Virginia for a little while, back in my hometown station in Virginia. And then in 2011, I landed in Birmingham, Alabama. And y'all, I didn't know anything about football in the South, okay? I mean, I guess, I grew up a Hokie fan, Virginia Tech. We had some pretty good runs under Frank Beamer. But like this idea of like SEC football, everybody's like, oh, it means more. And I'm like, well, what does that really mean? Well, I got here to Alabama and I was like, wait, what? Like, y'all take this real serious. Somebody honking at me? Y'all hear that? You mean? So I get to Alabama and I'm like, whoa, like, this is crazy. So I get my first indoctrination really into college football in the South. Next slide. This place called the Walk of Fame. How many of you in this room have been to an Alabama football game? Come on now. Yep. I imagine, I know you Tennessee fans haven't gotten to smoke as many cigars as the Alabama folks as of late. But, and y'all, I'm not an Alabama fan, okay? I'm not an Alabama fan. But, y'all might recognize this. Every campus has it, okay? Every campus has this, quad type thing, right? Where all the people tailgate, do all the things. So this is where it all goes down in Alabama. Denny chimes. So basically I'm getting my indoctrination. It's A-Day, okay? A-Day, for those of you who don't know, is a scrimmage. It's a glorified scrimmage, my friends. It's a spring game, in which over 50,000 fans show up to the stadium for a scrimmage. I'm like, what? Really? Well, before this scrimmage, they bring back the team captains from the previous season to be forever enshrined in the Alabama Walk of Fame. So you got all the team captains that come back, and this particular year is 2011's national championship team, so it's 2012, and that's Dante Hightower, Mark Barron, Trent Richardson, to name a few. And they're about to come back to put their hand and cleat print in the wet concrete to forever be enshrined. And I'm like, giddy up, let's go. So I'm there to cover this pageantry before we go into the stadium for the game. And my photographer looks at me and says, hey, I need the tripod for the camera. Could you run down to the stadium to get the tripod? I'm like, oh, well, I got tennis shoes on. And I was an athlete, more of a has-been. But sure, I got this, buddy. So I take off sprinting down University Boulevard as fast as I could go, y'all. About 500 yards. I get to the live truck. I rip that bad boy open. I grab that tripod for the camera. And as I'm slamming the door shut, y'all, I hear the sirens. Woo, woo. You know what that means? Police escort is on the way, my friends. Nick Saban and company are on the way. You better turn up the jets. I run back down University Boulevard, flash my credential to security to let them know I'm official. And as I run into the sea of people, suddenly the photographers and reporters are now standing in a circle. Well, where is my photographer at? I look around. Oh, he's right there on the other side. Well, y'all know the quickest way to get to him is not to go around the circle. Y'all know where I'm going with this, don't you? Oh no, I went right through the middle. But there's one little itsy-bitsy problem. There's a reason that the ladies and gentlemen were standing in a circle to protect that wet concrete. Oh my gosh. Y'all, as my foot sinks into the wet concrete, I'm thinking, y'all, and here's the problem. I was the rookie, I was the new kid on the block, and Nick Saban was the most intimidating man I had ever met, ever. And I said, this dude is, I'm going to lose my job. What am I going to do? And I looked down, I just destroyed everywhere. And I'm thinking, how are we going to fix this problem? I got fans looking at me, they're laughing, they're pointing, Twitter's blowing up. Like, I am literally in the throes of it. And all of a sudden, I look over to my right, and there's a gentleman that I'm pretty sure had halo and wings that day. And he had this thing that I like to call a spatula, but apparently it's called a trowel. Y'all, and he gets down on one knee, he starts smoothing over that wet concrete, and he looks up at me and says, you know, we were expecting someone like you to come along someday. I'm glad I could be that person, because I say, cue up Miley Cyrus, I came in like a wrecking ball. Thankfully, I did not lose my job. Nick Saban never even found out about it. I actually didn't tell him that story until last year when I was doing an event with him. So praise the good Lord, I kept my job, didn't lose my job. Sometimes you just gotta learn to cue up that blooper reel, let me tell you. But Picker, it didn't happen, because there it is, there's the shoe, with all that wet concrete dried up in it. I wish I would have kept the shoe. I ended up getting rid of it at some point. But, you know, that's kind of just how life goes, right? Life goes off script many a times. But I have to say, and for my females in the room, y'all, I am the first and only female to ever be enshrined in the Alabama Football Walk of Fame. Thank you very much. So that's life. That's how it goes. I love it. So, you know, you got to learn how to cue up the blooper reel. So life is going to go off script, you know, time and time and time again. So, thankfully, I did get a call from ESPN in 2016 to go do this sort of audition. I went to Auburn and did this audition, so to speak. It was Cupcake Week, and I did my first ever college football game for ESPN, and it was like, wow, that was awesome. I wasn't great. I kind of sucked, if I'm being honest. I was super nervous, but I got out there, and I did it. Thankfully, got a call back, and I just kept kind of building from there. But as I kind of figured out this whole career in sports broadcasting, I started to recognize that, you know, this whole, I'm gonna point at you, I'm gonna be like this every time, okay? Boom. You know, as I mentioned at the beginning, you know, being able to be out there when the confetti is raining down on the field, like it's such an exhilarating moment, right? Think like, wow, like these championships are won, and y'all, I'm really sorry. I know that I have a lot of like Alabama love here, so for those Roll Tide haters, it's not intentional. It's just like, I just have access to these, and they have won quite a few championships under Nick Saban. It just kind of is what it is, so I'm sorry. But the confetti raining down on the field, there was a time in my career where I was like, I just didn't understand it. Like I looked at it as the championships, the X's and O's, the stats, right? But it's so much more than the stats. When I look at this photo and I see the confetti raining down now, to me I see a story. Layers of stories, in fact, that don't just belong to the men hoisting that national championship trophy. Oh no. This belongs to every individual that touched their lives along the way. Because that's how championships are won, y'all. It takes a village, it takes a family, it takes a buy-in. And every single one of you has to do your job really well, for the next person to do their job really well, and to continue on and have that success. And even though I might be 1% of my operation and you might be 1% of your operation, you are ultimately the heartbeat of the work that you do in the infrastructure that we are so blessed to live within here in the United States of America. And that's a story. And you have a story. And our stories are all connected in a special way. And so when I think about the stories that I come across my, journeys, I always think, I want to find like that one story that can really touch people's lives. So I get a game assignment usually on Sunday. I'm on a plane Thursday flying to whatever game I'm covering in a given week. And so this particular year, and if you'll just switch to the next slide, don't push play. This particular year I was assigned to South Carolina and Kentucky. And this gentleman named J.J. Weaver, you see on the screen here, I didn't know much about him, but he had a story. And what I learned about this young man after spending some time on the phone with him throughout the week, leading up to the game, was that he had faced a lot of tragedy in his life, had a season-ending knee injury, and in that same year, lost his father to gun violence. But as you can see there on his right hand, he has 6 fingers. There is a very long name for it, a medical term. Remember, I didn't go to med school, so I can't pronounce it appropriately. But this young man had been through it. But ultimately, what he ran from and hid from the most was that. Because his entire life, he was bullied, he was made fun of, he was called an alien because he was different. And so he used to stuff 2 fingers into 1 finger of his glove, so much so that it would hurt, because he wanted to hide that piece of him, hide that part of his life. Until he got to Kentucky, he found his voice. He found the courage to speak up and to share his story. He even started a foundation called The Perfect Fit to help other student athletes going through traumatic circumstances, through tragedy, through trauma, to work through those things. So he was using his story now for good. So as game day rolls around, I have this opportunity to tell his story, and I'm so excited to tell his story. The guys send it down to me on the field to start telling J.J. Weaver's story. And no quicker than I start talking about him, all of a sudden, I hear the hand clap, the huddle breaks, the football's on the ground, the ball is snapped. And you know what that means for me? The reporter on the field, zip it. We don't want to hear from you anymore. Time to talk football. So y'all, in those moments, I was devastated. Devastated because I felt like I did not do this young man justice. His story deserved more than 30 seconds. More than 30 seconds. But what I soon realized is that 30 seconds was all it took to make an immeasurable impact. Because soon after that football game, this local 3rd grade teacher from an elementary school wrote into the athletic department saying she had seen that story on ESPN and was so moved and encouraged and inspired by it, because she too, in fact, was actually born with extra fingers on her hands, and has 2 students in her 3rd grade class that were also born with extra fingers on their hands. And so J.J. Weaver went to the school, spent time with these students, pouring into them, sharing his story, and ultimately helping them to see that their differences can be used as their superpower. And I share this story with you because this story ends up on College Game Day, watched by millions of people. And all it took was 30 seconds. 30 seconds that perhaps changed the trajectory of these kids' lives forever, all because J.J. Weaver found the courage to share his story and to stand in the gap for someone else. And y'all, we all have that opportunity to stand in the gap for someone else. But it sometimes takes a little bit of courage to step into that, to have that conversation, to share a piece of your heart, maybe a piece of your journey, maybe something that has been painful for you or something you've struggled with. But people can find themselves in your story. And perhaps that person standing next to you as you're out there, boots on the ground, doing the work that you do every single day, might need to hear that encouragement from you. 30 seconds is all it takes to make an impact to create a ripple effect. But as I stand up here on stage and share J.J. Weaver's journey, some of you were probably wondering if I was ever going to come back to my story. Come back to what happened to my parents that day on March 24th of 2003. Because much like J.J. Weaver, y'all, I strive for acceptance. And I did everything I could to hide from the truth. Because of that thing we talked about before, shame. Shame kept me in hiding. Because y'all, for years, I ran from the truth. I ran from reality. I did not want people to know the truth of how my parents died that day. So y'all, I had the sugar-coated story that I shared over and over and over again. So when people would ask me, well, what happened to your parents? I would tell people, my mom died of respiratory failure, my dad died of a heart attack. Why? Because that sounded so much better than my parents died of fentanyl overdoses. Y'all, I could not use the word addiction and overdose in the same sentence with both of my parents. Because what does society tell us about addiction? Addiction is bad. It's a character flaw. Throw them in the trash. My parents were none of those things. They were people. They were loving. They were joyful. They showed up. They made sure they were there for my brother and I. They made sure we had hot meals on the table. My dad went to work every single day to make sure that he could come home and provide for his family. But my parents were drowning. And shame was the thing that was pulling them down in silence. They were going to a pain management doctor, getting help for their chronic pain. My mom had degenerative disc disease. My dad had chronic back pain, PTSD from his service in the military. They did everything they could to get out of bed in the morning. And the prescription drugs that they were prescribed were the only thing getting them out of bed in the morning. Until one day, those prescription drugs they began to abuse because it just wasn't enough. I need more, I need more, I need more. And so what started out as an OxyContin prescription eventually escalated to fentanyl. And never in a million years did I think that my parents would ever fall victim to something like addiction and feel the need to take a drug that is so potent, to abuse that drug because it was the only thing that gave them hope, that allowed them to function. And just to know that they fought this fight alone, behind closed doors, in silence. My brother, me, my family, my Auntie Linda, my Uncle Mike, we had no idea what they were going through. No idea. And I remember I spent years running and running and running from reality. Running from the truth. Running from the shame that was trying to tackle me just as it did my parents. Until finally, my Auntie Linda, my mom's sister, got through to me. Y'all, for 7 years, my best friend in the whole wide world did not know how my parents died. That's how good I was at hiding it, creating this facade. But my Auntie Linda saw this wall that I put up, brick by brick. And brick by brick, she helped to break it down. And she helped me to realize that my parents are not defined by how they died, but by how they lived their lives. With love, with joy, with compassion. And yes, they too struggled. Just like everyone else here in this room. We all face struggle. And finally, when I confronted the truth, it was like those shackles of shame, y'all, the freedom that I finally felt, that I was no longer living this lie and recognizing that it's not just about preserving a legacy, it's also about building one too. And how can I do that? But you know, often in life, y'all, we're constantly running from the things that scare us, right? We're running from the things that, you can flip to the next slide. Running from the things that make us uncomfortable, sometimes the uncomfortable conversations. Well, I think back to a time, a memory that still lives vividly etched in my mind. My first Thanksgiving back home, after I had been at Rutgers for a semester. My first Thanksgiving, y'all, and I was so excited to get home, to be with my parents, to be with my family. My brother was coming home from Norfolk. We were all going to be together. And y'all, my mom was a good cook. And I mean, that dining hall food, let me tell you, I'd had my fair share of Count Chocula enough from the unlimited cereal. I was so excited for my mom's home cooking. And I could just envision it already, the food prepared around the table. I couldn't wait to wake up to the smell of the food in the oven as we're preparing for this Thanksgiving feast. But instead, I woke up to my mom screaming as loud as she could, "Someone call 911. I get out of my bed, my brother gets out of his bed, we go running through the hallway, down the stairs, and there I see my dad laying on the couch, blue, not breathing. I run and grab the receiver as my brother drags him off the couch and gets a spoon to try to open up his airways. And as I call 911 frantically, "Someone get here as fast as you can. My dad's dying, like someone get here." As the ambulance gets there, they show up, they load him in the back, and I remember just, "Please, dear Lord, let everything be okay." We get in the car and we follow my dad to the hospital that day, and we're sitting in the waiting room just waiting for them to come out and give us something, give us some news, tell us something. Finally, the doctor comes out and says, "Your dad's going to be okay." But that was a close call. And then my mom, as quickly as that, says, "All right, time to go home. Time to finish preparing our meal for Thanksgiving." And I'm like, "What? Just like that? Everything's okay? Wow. Thank goodness everything's okay." So we go back home, we have Thanksgiving. I go back to Rutgers like life is perfectly fine. Until several years would pass and I would learn that everything wasn't okay. That day that my dad got rushed to the hospital, he overdosed on fentanyl. He got taken to a psychiatric facility to be evaluated, as what happens typically is protocol when an overdose happens. And what I found out is that day he sat there at that table. He looked across the table at my mom. And he looked her in the eye and he said, "Maybe you'd be better off without me." And to think that for one moment in time that my dad thought this world and that his family would be better off without him. Just to know that he struggled the way that he did. I think to myself, man, if I could go back, have a conversation, maybe ask a few more questions, maybe lean in a little bit more to what was going on at home, I don't know that it would have saved their lives. But what I wouldn't give for my parents to walk through that door. And now my brother Alan, who we lost 1.5 years ago, to come through that door, to sit down, to have a conversation. Say, hey, we can get you help. We can take that next step. This is not the end. Because the bottom line is, y'all, nobody should ever be reduced to their hardest chapter and made to feel that their hardest chapter is their last. And I believe that with my heart because, y'all, we're all struggling. We're all hurting. We're all fighting for something. We all experience pain. But when you can lean in, don't run away from it, y'all. You gotta learn to attack it. Don't hide from it. Don't go let it consume you in the darkness in the corner. You gotta bring it into the light. Because that's where it wants you to live, and that's where it manifests, and that's where it grows. But when you can learn to bring that pain and to bring that shame into the light, bring that adversity into the light, you will find freedom. And you can be the very person that helps the guy or the girl next to you that is struggling to find the words to be able to speak up and to say, hey, I need help. So y'all don't run from adversity. Attack it. And then the next thing I want you to lean into. Y'all, we're always running, right? We're running from the things that make us uncomfortable, we're running from adversity. But sometimes we gotta learn to slow down, and dig our heels into the ground, y'all, and learn to be where our feet are. I encourage you to be where your feet are because this is something I heard from Nick Saban the first time, and I've now since heard it from a lot of coaches. And I didn't understand it when I first heard it. But in life, in things that have come up, I've started to realize that so often we're so quick to just running towards the next promotion, the next opportunity. We're all consumed in what everybody else's life looks like. Doom scrolling on social media, trying to reach for that next thing. But at the end of the day, y'all, we've got to learn to be present, to be where our feet are, because our purpose lives in the present. And that is so important in the jobs that you hold. It is critical in the safety and the wellness of yourself and for those around you to be present. And when something has gotten you, and you've got to get it out. Y'all, there is no shame in talking about it. No shame in asking for help. And so this is where this idea of this shatterproof playbook comes into place, something I kind of live by, this idea that you don't have to keep running. You can switch to the next one. It's this idea of not running from adversity, being where your feet are. Don't let dishonesty and that fear of the truth scare you. And stand in the gap for your people, y'all. These are your brothers and sisters in arms. And you could be the very reason that they get out of bed the next morning and show up to work and to keep going every single day. Don't be afraid to ask for help when it gets heavy. And I'll tell you, these are not just principles and things that I, kind of dabble in. Like, these have become promises not only to myself, but to my son, Mason. Now that I'm a mom and this whole idea of being where your feet are, like, I've realized more than anything that I've got to slow down. Y'all, I'm chasing that next opportunity. I'm at ESPN and I'm already looking at the next thing. Oh, I want to do this, I want to do that. I was living my dream job while already chasing that next thing. And when my son came into this world 2.5 years ago, I realized, I've got to slow down. Because y'all, time is non-refundable. You will never ever get it back. And that moment really came as a reflection for me at my parents' gravesite. About a year ago, I stood there, and Mason was with me, and of course he's young. He's about a year and a half, and he just has no idea what's going on, y'all. Ripping up flowers, tossing them around. But here's the thing. One day, Mason is going to ask questions. One day, Mason is going to want to know who his grandparents were and why they're not here anymore. And y'all, you know, it'd be real easy to just cue up the highlight reel, tell them about all the good things about my parents and about his Uncle Alan. Ooh. But, and don't think for a second I'm not going to share the highlight reel. But, y'all, we've got to learn to honor the struggle. Because that is what legacy is all about. Because we've all faced hardships. But those hardships are the strength behind everything you do every single day. They're the things that shape you and make you who you are. And that is what legacy is all about. And I want my son to know that yes, my parents were amazing people. Yes, my brother was an amazing person. But yes, they struggled. Life is hard. And I want my son to know that he is going to get knocked down. But that he too has the resilience to get back up, to make good choices, to make good decisions, and to keep going one foot in front of the other. And I want my son, just as I have, to learn to fall in love with his story. And what I hope that you will take with you today, to fall in love with your story. Every single messy, in progress part of it. Because when you think about your life, and you think about the things you've walked through and the challenges you've faced, and all the cracks inside of your life, in those chapters, y'all, those cracks, that is not a sign of weakness, my friends. Those cracks are proof that you are living. They are proof that you have fought and that you are still fighting. You are not defined by your hardest chapter, but by the courage it takes to keep writing the next one. Thank you all so much for this opportunity. I'm so grateful for you. For you all and the work that you do. And I know I mentioned it a little at the top, but I've gotten to do some work with Pine Bluff, and I got to go out on the dredge last year, and it was just so amazing just to see. And I know you guys are working in different parts of this industry, but I want you to know, literally when I walk down the road, or I'm with Mason and I'm on a sidewalk, I'm literally thinking about you guys, because I'm like, you guys are making this possible, all of this possible, and all the work that you do. It just means the world to me, and I want you to know that from the bottom of my heart. So I am with you in the fight. Be courageous out there, and keep doing great work, and I love you guys. Thank you, and I've got some books in the back. Once again, compliments to Pine Bluff. They have gifted those, and so I'm going to sign books. I've got about 200, so y'all better get back there and get them. I'm going to sign books. And so come get one. I'd love to give you one, or to you or your family. And again, thanks again. Love y'all, and have an awesome rest of the conference.